And so this will directly benefit freight infrastructure too, because freight trains will be able to go faster now. But
but you're still going to have passenger rail going like on your left.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Zooming by.
Welcome to the Streets.mn podcast, the show where we are celebrating a most triumphant time at the state legislature. People are rightfully calling 2023 a historic session, with the DFL trifecta making progressive moves in all kinds of arenas. We're going to focus on transportation and land use today by chatting with representatives from some of the biggest advocacy groups in the state. I'm your host, Ian R. Buck. Let's get right into it. Yeah, first here we're going to talk to Peter Wagenius, who is the legislative and political director of the Sierra Club North Star chapter. Sierra Club was very, very involved in, honestly, a very pivotal piece of making sure that a lot of this happened this session, because this session would not have happened if we hadn't elected a lot of the right people to get this DFL trifecta. So, Peter, can you talk a little bit about like how we got here? What was the story like right before we started this session?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question that way. I mean, in some ways, we've been building towards this for 20 years from a policy standpoint. But politically, what's happened just in the last two election cycles, I think, has been really critical. Sierra Club and other environmental organizations have been a lot more aggressive in campaigning for the candidates who are going to support the environment, really take action on the climate crisis, but also getting them to take really specific commitments. We had been screening candidates for office, asking them a specific question about, will you support a 3/4 cent Metro-wide sales tax? Because we were anticipating that was where the conversation was going to lead to, even though we figured...
And you really called that shot.
Oh yeah, well, and frankly, that was the first win of. I mean, getting this ultimate win was really from a series of 5 or 6 victories leading to the final victory. But the first one was just getting our key coalition united around the same proposal. And I sound like old man Wagenius when I say this, but I wanted to never let people forget the story of the lost decade. 10 years ago, we had a trifecta. There was huge progress made on education, healthcare, and other issues, and transportation got nothing. And I know that was on Frank Hornstein's mind, our House chair. I know it was on Senator Dibble's mind, our Senate chair. And we wanted to let nobody ever forget about it. We had a trifecta 10 years ago, and we didn't get anything done on transportation.
The two of them were there 10 years ago, right?
Yes, Scott was the chair at the time, and Frank was the policy chair. But they were both in the legislature. They had both been in the legislature for a while. They knew the size of the opportunity. And one of the key lessons out of that we wanted to not let people forget is that it was taken down by two things, really. The controversy around the gas tax, and the fact that the advocates were not consistently united around the same proposal. And so we talked to our candidates and said, over the last couple election cycles, A, we want you to commit to a 3/4 cent Metro-wide sales tax as the funding source. B, we want you to promise to us that you're going to make that happen with or without road funding. Obviously, it's easier with road funding because then the environmental lobby and the labor lobby can all be together around the same proposal. And that's ultimately what happened. That's great. But we wanted to make sure they knew, learning that lesson from 10 years ago, it was the gas tax that took us down. And it was having the advocacy community not united. In particular, there was a fight between the counties who wanted to control the transit money and the Met Council who wanted to control the transit money. And what we were saying from the word go is, no, we are not getting pulled into that. We are going to understand this. We have 2 years to fight over money. We have we have 2 years to fight over policy. We only got a couple of months to seize this opportunity to grab the money. We need a united proposal. And frankly, some folks struggled to say, should it be the sales tax? Because it's not a perfect revenue stream. We acknowledge that. It's people would note that it's a regressive tax, but we were helping people understand and building a coalition around this understanding. You know what's the most regressive possible outcome? The status quo. That's what's regressive. Never building a transit system because you never get on board a proposal that it will actually work. And when we've already been in line this long, when the Senate passed a half-cent Metro-wide sales tax 10 years ago, and the House passed it 4 years ago and 2 years ago, you're teed up. Don't change horses, when you're that close to winning. Just grab the thing and recognize that in its total effects, it's an incredibly progressive win, because there are thousands and thousands of people who are not going to have to buy a second car or a car at all, saving them $9,000 to $10,000 a year. That's incredibly progressive, even if the revenue stream is not perfect. The other key strategic thing about this is it's really easy to target a sales tax to a particular geography. That's the other thing that you talk to people around the country. If you try to tax rural areas to pay for metro transit, don't hold your breath. You will never win. It will never happen. And so we wanted to make this bill a bill that was really easy for greater Minnesota Democrats, because the reason we have the majority is because we all have all these votes in the metro area, plus Rochester, Duluth, St. Cloud, Moorhead.
And don't forget Cook County.
Yeah, and Cook County and Winona. That's how we get there. So there was no way to pass this bill without making it a really easy vote for greater Minnesota Democrats to support. And having a sales tax only in the metro area was unquestionably the right call. I think that's proven now, but that was not a given. And I think building this bigger coalition, Move Minnesota and Sierra Club were always going to be on board this. But I think we built a bigger coalition than we've ever built before. Plus, as I pointed out to folks, we've already been screening candidates on the basis of supporting this. So we're starting ahead of the game. If we're starting ahead of the game where legislators have already been asked and they've already answered, we will support this, you got to go with that.
Let's talk again about how we got to a DFL trifecta that unlocked all of this for us, because it wasn't like transportation was not the issue that voters were thinking about when they elected most of these people.
But climate was. Climate was. It has been increasing in importance for voters. Salience is sometimes the technical term that campaigners use. I mean, environment has always scored really well as do you support the environment or not? It's been one of the highest scoring things. But the question is that going to be the vote that actually switches you from voting for this candidate A or candidate B? Salience has drastically increased for climate. And of course, the unforced error by the Republicans in choosing to alienate young voters, women, through their successful campaign to end Roe versus Wade was also extremely powerful. Powerful in that it led to our candidates winning, but it also created a bond, I think, between core progressive candidates and candidates in swing districts. In the past, I think people have talked about you got to persuade them with different messages. And what we experienced is that you could talk about climate, you could talk about reproductive freedom, you could put them together in the same message, and it would work in the DFL core and it would work in swing districts. Here's how we merged, and I'm looking at a lit piece. I realize this is radio, so I'm just gonna repeat this. Here's one of the candidates we talked about. Judy Seeberger for state senate. Judy Seeberger will protect our freedoms to make our own reproductive choices, breathe clean air and drink clean water, and have a livable climate. We united climate as a message and reproductive choice as a message under the freedom banner. You see what we did there? That plays everywhere. And it really touched on what a wide swath of voters were recognizing, which was the radicalism of the other side. And when our side, taking the advice from Annette Schenker-Osorio, when our side is the side for freedom to make our own reproductive choices, freedom to breathe clean air and clean water, freedom to have a livable climate, I think that was absolutely crucial to winning particularly these suburban races that I think put us over the edge. What I just described for one candidate is something that Sierra Club did for a bunch of our candidates, and we encouraged other environmental organizations to do the same.
What a prescient move, honestly. Like,
I would love to be able to claim that I came up with this all on my own, but really it was the coalition work of Sierra Club being at tables with 100% Campaign and Take Action Minnesota and Move Minnesota, and also with pro-choice organizations, and listening to people like Annette Schenker-Osorio, and kind of like putting it all together and saying, well, how does this apply to a Minnesota legislative race? And is it really different on these key things? Is it really different between a swing district and a base district? And realizing, no, it's not. But it was really important in those suburban swing districts. And I would make this point, and forgive me for sounding a little bit like an evangelist, but these legislators did right by us in a whole bunch of ways, for choice, for climate, for a bunch of other issues. And it's now time for us to do right by them. When you think about these ideological centrists who, and I use that term deliberately, who just love to say overreach, overreach, overreach. If the progressive candidates ever do anything worthwhile, that's dangerous because it's overreach. What a great message, thinking about that horrible analysis. Don't actually help people. Don't actually address the climate or protect their freedoms because people might call it overreach. I would love to prove them wrong in the next election. I would love everybody who's listening to this podcast, everybody who's excited about all the things we're doing for climate, and not just this bill. We passed 3 big climate bills this year. I would love it if people said, you know what, I'm going to go door knock for Lucy Ream and Brad Tabke and Matt Norris and all the people who brought us this victory, because they did right by us. We got to do right by them. And it would send a message to all those people who say, don't use government to improve people's lives. It would send a great message that they could be this assertive on behalf of our freedoms and not pay a price. And it's not overreach. It's them doing what they said they were going to do. So I hope we will all do right by them because they did right by us. Another key thing about something that happened this year is, so Sierra Club and Move Minnesota have been working on this for years. Isaiah has been a partner for years. Isaiah put big resources into this in a way that they hadn't in the past because they could see the opportunity, and a lot of credit is due to them. But I also have to mention 100% Campaign. Mm-hmm. A beautiful thing happened to us during the session, which is not only did the 100% bill pass, it passed in early February, which means these wonderful folks who were mobilized on behalf of the 100% clean energy bill, Clean Energy by 2040, which is the first of our big 3 environmental wins. Those folks were able to redeploy Chris Connery and Aurora Vatrin and all of the folks that they'd mobilized. I guarantee we got a bigger, better bill, bigger in terms of dollars for transit, better in terms of policy, because the coalition was bigger. So hats off to Jamie Long and everybody who was able, and Sierra Club was working on that bill too, but passing it early and being able to redeploy all that energy and staff time was a big part of being able to then pass these other 2 climate bills, the Omnibus Energy and Environment Bill and the Omnibus Transportation Bill. So the first victory was getting everybody on board the same proposal, big coalition. The second victory was getting the House and Senate to both offer a big number, 3/4 cent Metro-wide sales tax in both the House and the Senate bill. But then what happened? The Senate Tax Committee took Senator Dibble's bill and they shrunk it way down on both the road side and on the transit side. Functionally cut it in half in terms of new transit dollars, from 3/4 cent to 1/2 cent, forgetting that like the first 1/4 cent is just there to eliminate the deficit. So what did we do? We argued for going back up to the 3/4 cent for the Senate to match the House bill. Now, how did we do that? We went to suburban legislators and we said, you know why we need more money? We need more money because we want to serve your community. We want your community to be included. And if we don't have the bigger number, we know what's going to happen. Your community is the one that's going to get left out because suburban transit is more expensive. That's not an accusation. We're just talking math here. Suburban transit, you have to drive more miles, using more driver hours to pick up fewer passengers who are further apart. It's just math. It's harder it's more expensive to do. Does that mean we don't do it? No, it means we raise the money necessary to make sure all these communities get served. Also, for a lot of those communities, the way they're going to take a long trip to a destination further away is going to be with highway BRT, not arterial BRT. Well, highway BRT is more expensive. So we walked to legislator after legislator. I showed them the 2014 highway BRT study and said, your community's on this list, but they're not going to get their project unless we do the amount of funding that allows us to pay for transit in the core and the more expensive transit, in the outer parts of the district or the metro area, or at least where the Democrats represent. But that ended up coming in really handy, because not only did we have to get the money back up to the House amount in the Senate bill, the original Senate amount, but there was also an attack on our funding from the collar counties. The collar counties are the 7 metro counties minus Hennepin and Ramsey. The collar counties, though, said they already got 1/6 of the revenue, 17%, in the original House and Senate bills as they came off the floor. And when they saw that money and they realized, oh, we got 1/6 of the money, instead of getting 17%, let's get 40%. And we, Sierra Club, Movement, 100%, Isaiah, we were able to push back on that attack and go back to those legislators and say, remember the reason we need more money. We need more money to be able to serve your districts, your suburban districts, to be able to bring projects like the Orange Line and to facilitate developments like Burnsville, heart of the city, the last stop on the Orange Line, to your district. That was what protected that money for transit. So it was 83% of the money goes to transit, 17% to the counties. They wanted to increase their carve out from 17% to 40%. Oh my God, that would have been a disaster. And we were able to push back and keep it at 83% of the money goes to transit, because every part of the region, at least every part of the region represented by a Democrat, we wanted to make sure they could see themselves in this future.
All right, so now we have Sam Rockwell, Executive Director of Move Minnesota, here to talk about mostly about transit stuff, but transportation in general. So yeah, Sam, like what were some of the highlights of things that we accomplished this session?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here. Streets MN rules. We ended up with serious long-term dedicated funding for transit. And I keep saying long-term dedicated funding because that is really what allows the transit agency to both plan long-term, know that they've got money coming in the door so they can plan long-term, and also to operate the system that they're building out. So that's really important, and we won big. There's a 0.75% sales tax in the metro area. It's going to be starting up to fund transit, and that's going to bring in about $450 plus million every year to support transit in the metro area. There's also money to support transit, increased transit funding across the state through a couple other mechanisms. So it's not just the Twin Cities region, but across the state is going to see that funding. We saw a new transit ambassador program created and kind of expanded. We saw a free fare pilot get passed. We saw some working groups around figuring out how to make our local buses move faster. And then we saw a kind of a shift in how we think about what our transportation should be, with some limitations on highway capacity expansion, ensuring that capacity expansion and interchange projects are consistent with our vehicle miles traveled targets and our greenhouse gas reduction targets in the state of Minnesota. 5/6 of the sales tax receipts go to transit, and then 1/6 goes to what they call roads on the spreadsheet. But that roads money, that 1/6, which is about just shy of $100 million a year, that gets divvied up between the counties in the metro area according to a formula in a new section of the law. And that formula is to divvy out the money that goes to counties in the following way. So this isn't the only source of funds that follows this formula. 41.5% of the funds have to be spent on active transportation. 41.5% of the funds can be spent on roads and bridges, but cannot be spent on capacity expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And the remaining 17% can be used for transit or for some kind of like related types of funding, mitigation measures, which could be biking and walking as well, for this broader greenhouse gas vehicle miles traveled program we talked about earlier. So my understanding is that that formula applies to that sales tax money, and that appears to be the way it's written. But it's not written quite as clearly as one would maybe do now that you sort of look at it. It was anyway. That's the setup there.
Sam, it's just law. Like, how hard could it be?
I mean, I can read you the actual language here. I was going back and forth on this over the weekend, actually. The question is whether the funds that are getting distributed to the counties are being counted as being received under subdivision 5, if there's a difference between received and distributed. So if you want to go into the weeds, I'm there.
Oh, no, that sounds like a headache that I don't want. When we were talking about the, at the time proposed 1 cent sales tax in the metro area for transit stuff, the stuff that we were talking about it allowing us to do was basically like all of my hopes and dreams, right? Like everything I could ever want for transit was included in the pitch for like a 1 cent sales tax. So we got a 75-cent sales tax, 0.75 cent sales tax. How many of those things do we anticipate like having unlocked? Like, are we going to have transit ambassador programs? Are we going to have, like how much of, are we going to be rapidly expanding the amount of arterial BRT lines? Like what do you think is going to be next for Metro Transit?
Yeah, I mean, the 0.75% sales tax is a total game changer. I mean, to put this in kind of a scale perspective, Metro Transit's current budget is somewhere in the $500 million a year range, but they're running a $130 million annual deficit. Okay.
So realistically, we're looking at a $630 million budget, actually.
Yeah, sort of. But so this then closes that budget deficit, mm-hmm. and then leaves an additional $300 million or so in the black.
All right.
So that's a lot of money. It's not doubling the budget, but that's a big jump. And that's awesome. I mean, that means we can build out a bus rapid transit system extremely quickly. Even if we weren't pulling federal money in, but we are pulling federal money in, we do have the ability to pull bonding money in. There were a couple of bus rapid transit lines actually funded with an additional $72 million of bonding money in the capital investment bill this year. So that's not the only money that's going towards transit. We can use that to fund those capital projects, and then all the kinds of operational things that I think you and I have talked about before, the kinds of things like having a transit ambassador program, being able to hire more drivers. Yes, we've been in a driver shortage, but we're seeing that trend turn around. And that's not sort of like a permanent forever state of being, even though it has felt like a long 18 months. And we are in a position of really being able to increase frequency to 5 or 10 minutes, because we can hire those drivers. We can buy more buses for existing lines. We are able to contemplate, like for real, looking at free or reduced fares, significant different fare pass programs, or just eliminating them altogether. We're able to think about investments in the ongoing upkeep of bus lanes, expansion of the system as a whole, new highway bus rapid transit projects. I mean, this is a real game changer. The real cap on what we can do is the long-term operating cap, and to have an additional $300 million to use for operations in the long term is huge.
Yeah. I love God. I'm so stoked.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome.
Like, I know that this isn't going to be like an overnight thing, but like I feel like this is the turning point where in a few years I'm going to not be hearing like ordinary people saying to me like, yeah, I would love to live somewhere where like it's possible to live without a car, you know? And like, and as somebody who is living in the Twin Cities without a car, like, you know, I look at people who say that and I'm like, well, I mean, it is possible. But like, I feel like that perception, like this may be the turning point of being able to change that perception for people in the Twin Cities.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say, we need the right leadership at Metro Transit and the Met Council to make this happen. Right. I mean, we need somebody who has the reaction that you just had to look at this money and say, I am stoked to make like extraordinary change and just go for it. I mean, we saw like the streetscape of New York City. I used to live in New York City, saw the streetscape of New York City just transform in like 3 to 5 years because they had a transportation commissioner who was just like all in on changing the streets to make them more bikeable and closing down like major intersections and turning them into plazas. And it just changed. The city just changed, you know, rolling out City Bike. And so if we have somebody who says, you know, we are going to go hard on trying to get bus lanes, signal priority, and like a whole bunch of bus rapid transit projects and hiring more drivers, however we possibly can over the next 5 years, we are going to see a wildly different system.
We had some developments on like gas taxes, right? Not only was it increased, but also like it has been changed so that it's indexed to inflation, right?
That's correct. Yep.
And did we change like what gas tax revenue can be used for? Because that's been one of our big frustrations is that it's only allowed to be used for like, you know, roads and bridges.
It did not get changed. It is constitutionally dedicated to the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund. And that fund can only be used for, quote, highway purposes, end quote. So a fair-minded attorney like me would argue that highway purposes include lots of things, like the buses that run on highways. Like, you know, pedestrian bridges and bicycle ways going across the highways, expanding that to the full highway corridor and so forth. But, you know, that still is open to agency interpretation, and it is still restricted in the Constitution. I think there's just so many game-changing parts of this bill, and I hope that the listeners of this podcast at the end of this episode kind of take a step back and absorb the totality of it all. Because it's really easy to say like, oh, cool, there's this capacity expansion thing. And cool, there's all this funding for transit. And there's an e-bike tax credit and all of these different things. But then you start to think about like how that all works together. Like our highways are not expanding the way they were. And people have all these other options, including e-bikes and kind of standard active transportation, biking, walking, so many more transit options. I mean, we could be looking at a totally different state really soon, because of how all of these policies and funding streams work together.
Yeah, there you go. That's the takeaway.
That's the takeaway, man.
I love it. Well, Sam, I'm looking forward to being able to see you on the other side in this wonderful new state that we're building.
I know. Stay involved, everybody. It's going to take work to get it all done.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks for joining us, Sam.
Cool. Ian, great to see you.
All right, so we are here with Brian Nelson, president of All Aboard Minnesota, which is our premier train advocacy group in the state.
Well, thank you for that, Ian.
To talk about what gains we got in the last legislative session for passenger rail. We had Brian on almost a year ago. It was summer of 2022 to talk about what things looked like at that time.
Yep.
And we've had a few developments.
Yes.
So some very exciting ones.
Very exciting developments. So Thank you for that, Ian. Yes, this was a very historic transportation bill. It not only addressed probably every area of the state, but it addressed almost every mode of transportation within the state. And for the first time, recognizing that transportation is short of funding by over $1 billion a year, there were some new fees and things implemented to close that shortfall. So it was a very historic bill. But in terms of passenger rail, it was probably the most investment this state has made since the late 70s, actually. And what happened in this legislative session was that the transportation bill fully funds the Northern Lights Express train from the Twin Cities to Duluth, provides $194 million, which is the full state match to match federal money to construct the line for 90-mile-an-hour running.
Which we needed in order to unlock the federal funding, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yep. So the state of Minnesota is paying for 20% of it. The infrastructure jobs bill pays for 80% of it.
Okay.
For all the construction. So that'll include new stations, grade crossings, 90-mile-an-hour running, which is, faster than conventional passenger train speeds of 79 miles an hour. But MnDOT really felt, and I think rightly so, that they wanted the service to be competitive, the schedule to be competitive with drive times.
Right.
So that's one very historic major piece that was passed.
And I think that's the one that got the most attention.
It did,
because
yes.
it's a new project, so it's very high profile. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And the state of Minnesota funded that service from 1975 to 1985. So that's the last time trains ran on that route. Before Amtrak, of course, was a very popular route. There were 3 different railroads that offered passenger service from the Twin Cities to Duluth. So it is a very well-established route, very well-established service, and I think it's greatly needed.
Yeah. I mean, we're recording this on Memorial Day, and I just came back from Grand Marais, where, I had to take a folding bike with me up there because, you can't take full-size bikes on the bus that goes up to Duluth. And so, so, this just unlocks, so many, the variety of types of trips that you can take.
Exactly.
Not just between St. Paul or Minneapolis and Duluth, but it unlocks a lot more along the North Shore as well.
Exactly.
Which is where everybody in Minnesota loves to go and spend their vacations.
That's right. Exactly. And what was interesting to me is, especially this year, there were a lot of people of your generation testifying about the fact that without a car, it is really difficult to travel in this state. It's not convenient, or it's really expensive, and it's just very difficult to get around without a car.
See, you say that they're from my generation, but I looked at all those college students who showed up to testify together, and I'm like, oh my God, you're so young.
Well, I'm kind of lumping you into the generation. But it's true, and they gave a lot of very poignant examples about, the fact that college students can't rent cars. Bus schedules are typically inconvenient and slow. Short hop air service has been cut back, as well as bus service. And short hop air service is very expensive. And so it's just extremely difficult to get around this state.
Yeah.
And so there was just a lot of really good testimony. And it opened my eyes to the fact that, once again, if you have money and or you have a car, this state serves you really well. If you don't have one of those two things, it's really difficult to get around. Yeah. So that's one piece. The second piece out of the 3 is that the state of Minnesota provided full operational funding, meaning the annual cost to run the second Twin Cities to Chicago train.
Okay.
And so,
which was already it was already on its way to opening.
Well, this was the last piece because last session, the state of Minnesota provided $10 million to unlock federal money to provide the infrastructure upgrades along the route.
Gotcha.
What they didn't do last session was provide the operational support. So this operational money also leverages a federal grant to provide the operating cost, what the fare box won't recover.
Gotcha.
But the fare box recovery ratio for a service like this is actually very high, typically ranging, and they range in corridors around the country, but they typically range anywhere from 60 to 80%.
Okay.
So, it's that's also a very needed service, and models have shown that it will be very well patronized.
Yeah. And so you say that they funded operating budget, but is that like the operating budget for X number of years? Or
for 2 years.
Okay.
Yes. So for the next transportation budget, the state of Minnesota will need to come up with more money. But
okay.
What has been shown over time is that once ridership increases, as the service becomes established and more well-known, is that fare box recovery goes even higher. So the state support typically decreases. And that's exactly what's happening in Wisconsin with the Chicago to Milwaukee Hiawatha service.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The state subsidies over time have lessened just because ridership keeps increasing.
And the popularity of the service goes up.
Exactly.
So it's less politically feasible to just drop
exactly
that operational
right.
funding.
Yep, exactly right. And then the third piece, which we truly welcome, is a study of the St. Paul to Fargo-Moorhead passenger rail corridor. Mm-hmm. So in that will be recommendations about what to do with the North Star commuter rail service between here and Big Lake. For example,
possibly between here and St. Cloud, depending on how well that study goes.
Right, exactly. And so, but it will also look at the needs for long distance passenger rail, like extending the second Twin Cities Chicago train to Fargo-Moorhead on a daytime schedule on the current Empire Builder route through St. Cloud, which is what we've long advocated for. And there's a lot of support in all the communities up and down that line: Little Falls, Wadena, St. Cloud, Bemidji, Brainerd. They're all very supportive of daytime passenger service on that corridor.
That's very interesting that you listed all those communities, because like Staples and Detroit Lakes are the only ones that actually have stations in between St. Cloud and Fargo.
Correct.
Right.
That's correct. And they're very supportive as well.
Yes. Well, I mean, they directly benefit, but but even I suppose it makes it a lot easier if you want to drive from Brainerd to Staples.
Yeah.
Or whichever one is the closest one.
Yeah, probably Staples or Detroit Lakes.
Yeah.
But so those three pieces of legislation got passed within the transportation bill, which is hugely transformative for this state, because it means that hundreds of thousands of people are literally going to benefit from new rail passenger service. And since 1985, we've only had Amtrak's Empire Builder, which goes from Chicago through the state of Minnesota, in the dark hours of the night and in the morning, onto Chicago, onto Seattle and Portland. So this is really a game changer for people who cannot drive or fly or don't want to.
Yep. So
we're very excited about this. The second Twin Cities Chicago train could begin rolling as early as this fall. The Twin Cities to Duluth service could be in a range, once federal funding is secured and all that's put in place and all the mechanisms start to roll, could be 3 to 5 years from now.
Okay.
Just because it takes that long to, construct, the new grade crossings, the stations, upgrade the signaling, all of those things.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's the rolling stock.
Because that's mostly on existing freight rail.
Yes.
But some of it's going to need to be upgraded in order to accommodate 90 mile an hour.
Yep. New sidings. There's MnDOT's proposing 4 round trips a day. So, typically freight trains on that line right now move at about 50 miles an hour. So you're talking about passenger trains that are going almost twice that fast.
Right.
And so this will directly benefit freight infrastructure too, because freight trains will be able to go faster now. But
but you're still going to have passenger rail going on your left.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Zooming by. So there's going to be, new sidings. The rail infrastructure itself is going to need to be upgraded for that running. So it'll take a few years, but it's coming.
Yeah. And let's see, if I remember some of the other things we talked about last year, we haven't made any progress on like Twin Cities through Kansas City, like the Dan Patch line. We didn't get that gag order repealed, did we?
That was in the bill. I think it got removed though.
Okay.
But MnDOT has contacted Iowa DOT and Missouri DOT, and because MnDOT is interested in that route.
Mm-hmm.
They feel that it's a very viable route. We think, obviously, that it's a very viable route. And there's a lot of support along the communities of Minnesota for that service.
Right.
But Missouri DOT is very supportive of that service. I'm not sure what response they got from Iowa DOT. The governor there is not exactly enthusiastic about rail passenger service. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
But MnDOT has made some overtures, so there has been incremental progress. And this year, the state passenger rail plan is going to be updated. And they've asked for our input, and so we're going to lobby heavily that route get pushed pretty high in the ranking order. So yeah, we have our work cut out for us, but we're again very, very thankful to the chairs of the Senate and House Transportation Committee for their vision, their leadership, their stick-to-itiveness to keep passenger rail in the bills when they face some odds in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just extremely grateful to them for their vision and leadership, and we're thanking them right now for that. And thank you to all of the Minnesotans who, on our behalf and Move Minnesota's behalf, called legislators and say, keep transportation funding for transit passenger rail because it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it will.
Yeah. All aboard.
All aboard.
Brian, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate the opportunity.
A couple of months ago, we had Dorian Grilly from the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota on to talk about the legislative agenda that they were going to be pursuing. And let's find out how much of that actually happened, how much took place. I think we have a lot more to talk about now than if we had done this episode, like last year or the year before. Dorian, how'd this go?
Well, we're so excited here at Bike Min. Pretty much everything we asked the legislature for in 2023 has become law. Our asks were included in the historic omnibus transportation policy and funding bill that passed the legislature late Sunday on May 21st, and Governor Walz signed it into law on May 24th.
Nice. So the big piece that we were going for was the Bill Dooley Bicycle Safety Act. How much of that remained intact? I know that there were a couple of small things that got changed.
Correct. We asked for $35 million a year for active transportation and safe routes to school, and got 30. So when you get 30 of 35 million, actually 29 of 35 million, when you ask, it's really a big win. And just about everything that we asked for policy-wise, including the Idaho stop, was included. So it also included a rebate of up to $1,500 on the purchase of a new e-bike and qualifying accessories.
Nice. Yeah. I've seen a few people online kind of lamenting the fact that the Idaho stop that we got doesn't include stop lights. It only applies to stop signs. But I feel okay about that because we already have a law about if a cyclist is at a stoplight and they have a reasonable, they've been there long enough to suspect that, hey, the light doesn't sense me, it's not going to change for me, then you can proceed through the red light, as long as there aren't any oncoming cars.
That's correct. And I was also approached by the Minnesota State Patrol and the Minnesota Department of Transportation saying, we really oppose the stoplight provision in this bill, but we're okay with the stop sign. And so that was the compromise that we reached with the State Patrol, Department of Public Safety, and Department of Transportation.
Okay. Yeah. But we got the practicable has been changed, right? That's now.
Correct. Bicyclists may now ride as far to the right as is safe, as determined by you, the bicyclist. It's no longer that vague word practicable that some law enforcement people interpret as riding in the gutter, and have stopped bicyclists in the metro area for doing that. It also includes riding through a right turn lane without turning right.
Oh,
And
yes.
I know that's accepted practice. Nobody's getting a ticket for it. But the key to having this in law is that if a driver turns left and hits you while you are riding through a right turn lane without turning right, it's your fault until August 1st this year. So be careful. But after August 1st, it will not be your fault. So I think that's an important thing. It may make the difference in a crash for someone sometime in the future.
Yep. So August 1st is when all of these road law safety provision things change, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then we mentioned the e-bike subsidy. Did we get the education stuff for elementary schools and whatnot?
I am so excited. I think that's one of the most important provisions that's in this bill. I think it's something that we as cyclists should consider transformational. And what it does is right now, schools must teach bus safety, and they may teach bicyclist and pedestrian safety. But that is also going to change. So now schools must teach bicycle and pedestrian safety. And that does not just include middle school or elementary school. It includes middle school too. So actually, it doesn't really specify. So I think it's something we can help all grade levels, including driver ed, to teach bicycle and pedestrian safety. We, of course, hope that the elementary schools and middle schools will adopt the whole Walk Bike Fun curriculum, which is many lessons, including 3 on-bike lessons. And there are now new grade-appropriate lessons for middle schools. So we hope they'll do that, but at least there's a minimum that they're going to have to talk for 10 or 15 minutes about biking and walking safety, and at least send a flyer home in the kid's backpack.
Nice. Let's see. We're bringing back the Active Transportation Committee.
Yeah, that's one of the things I thought was also important. When the Republicans were in control of both the House and Senate, they allowed that committee to sunset. It has to be reauthorized by the legislature for the Department of Transportation to convene. And I didn't think it made any sense then, so we agreed with the Department of Transportation to pursue that. The other important provision in there is that the language basically requires MnDOT to be the state's active transportation leader, provide guidance and be a resource to cities and counties and others who are looking for guidance on active transportation and safe routes to school projects. It's not that the MnDOT staff currently isn't doing a great job of doing this. I think they are, but previous administrations have placed less of an emphasis on it, and we wanted the legislature to tell them that that's important.
Yeah. If we can get to a point where, like, as a transportation activist, I don't dread hearing MnDOT's name on a project, like if that doesn't automatically put me into like fight or flight mode, I feel like we're going to be in a good place.
Absolutely. Yeah. MnDOT has, one of the best staffed active transportation units in the country. And we should be proud of that. I think they're doing a great job. They have staff with that as part of their job description in every district. So I think MnDOT really is an active transportation leader in this country. I'm also really excited about the simple fact that the legislature, not MnDOT, authorized the Mississippi River Trail as a state bicycle route. MnDOT had signed it in cooperation with the cities and counties all along the way, but they hadn't been. The project hadn't been endorsed by the legislature. The MnDOT had also signed and mapped and planned the North Star bicycle route from the Twin Cities to Duluth and up the North Shore, but the legislature never agreed to name it after former Congressman Jim Oberstar, who served 38 years in Congress, was the person who created the transportation, the bicycling and walking provisions and safe routes to school provisions in the federal transportation bill 30 years ago. So I'm really excited that the North Star bicycle route will now be renamed after former member of Congress, Jim Oberstar, who served the Minnesota 8th District for 38 years.
Wowie. Another long distance, route of statewide significance that I can think of is the Gateway State Trail. I remember a year or two ago hearing rumors about that there was funding possibly coming in to finish, extending that all the way to Scandia and William O'Brien State Park. Was that at all looked at this session?
That would have been part of the Environment Bill. And the Department of Natural Resources, I think, does have the funding to do that and has been working on acquisition in partnership with the Gateway Trail Association and the Parks and Trails Council of Minnesota. The challenge is the Department of Natural Resources and the state has been told by the legislature that they do not have condemnation authority, so they can only acquire right-of-way for the Gateway and other state trails from willing sellers.
Okay.
So that's their challenge, is to piece together a puzzle all the way to Scandia and actually to the state park in Taylor's Falls.
Oh, interstate.
Interstate, yeah.
Yeah.
William O'Brien and Interstate State Park. I think that'll be really important. And there was an allocation for a portion of the trail that has been acquired in Scandia. So there will be some construction sometime soon around Scandia. The metropolitan sales tax of 0.75 cents will raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and 5% of which will be dedicated to active transportation and allocated by the Metropolitan Council's Transportation Advisory Board. The forecasted amount for that fund is about $23 million a year. So that will be added to the funds, the federal funds that the Metropolitan Council is already allocating. And $23 million a year is a significant amount. Will help projects like St. Paul and their effort to put a protected bikeway along Summit Avenue. We have to have that kind of commitment of ongoing money. So when St. Paul or other cities in the metro area are doing road rebuilds and have transportation-oriented biking and walking projects, they need to be able to apply to the Metropolitan Council to include those in their projects along the way.
Yeah.
And the Omnibus Transportation Bill also included a transportation advancement account and allocates about $95 million a year to the metro counties. It specifies that 41.5% of that amount, which is about $39 million, is to be spent on active transportation and transportation corridor safety studies. And the rest of the money can be used to modernize those corridors without adding traffic capacity, which means, modernizing is in my head means more complete streets projects. I think that's a really important thing. So that more than doubles the 23 million that's in the sales tax. But we're going to need listeners to this podcast and Bikemen supporters all throughout the metro area. We'll need to monitor that program and work to ensure that that money is well spent.
Right,
So,
right. We need to make sure that the project staff understand what modernization means in the same way that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes grassroots action. So I encourage the listeners to stay in touch with Bikemen through our e-news or our blog, where we will be posting more details about how our members can get involved at the county level and the city level to make sure that that safety money is spent and the recommendations of those safety studies are implemented to modernize our transportation corridors and do more complete streets projects.
I'm really, really glad that we're in a place where it has never been better to bike in Minnesota, and we're just going to continue making it better.
Absolutely. I hope this will help us with our scoring, state level scoring with the League of American Bicyclists.
Yep. All right. Dorian, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks a lot. Yeah.
One last bike thing. Progress on the Midtown Greenway extension.
What they passed will fund very specific things. It will fund a real design, like you would see with anything else, a real design where you can see exactly how wide it is, exactly how this connects to existing facilities. Being able to say to the federal government, we're going to connect these with a really high quality facility means that the project has independent utility, meaning even if we aren't able to build the piece that depends on cooperation from the railroad, even if we just build the other pieces within the city of St. Paul, we are connecting existing bike facilities to other bike facilities, making them all a more effective network. But here's the other thing that this bill does, and it's the part that is most important to me. It requires the Met Council to do the legal work to develop a draft shared use agreement that can be presented by a public sector agency to the railroad for use of the bridge. We all know the deal with the bridge. The bridge was built for 2 rail lines in each direction, and for decades, it's only had 1. So there's plenty of space. This is not a physical problem. The bridge can handle this. The problem has been, how do we negotiate a shared use agreement for the bridge that can entice the railroad into working with us, knowing that there's federal attention from Omar and from Congresswoman Omar, Congresswoman McCollum, and we even got a letter from our senators saying this is a priority project. And if the public sector embraces this opportunity, notices just in a historical context that there's a lot of money floating around, and brings a serious proposal to the railroad, recognizing that times have changed and that opportunities exist, I think this is our best shot.
Yeah. Let's seize the day.
Seize the day. Absolutely. Seize the day.
One major transportation surprise this year was when Governor Walz vetoed the bill that would have given ride-hailing drivers higher wages and rights that are closer to those of employees, which was pretty disappointing, but it seems like he is willing to develop a policy along those lines next year. Which brings me to our final little topic. As Peter mentioned, this year's focus was mostly on securing funding for transit and all of the good stuff that we want to do. And then next year we can really get into the weeds of policy proposals to leverage that funding. I'm particularly interested in how we can improve rural public transit. Here in Minneapolis, Neighbors for More Neighbors is hosting a state policy summer camp to prepare us for next year's session. The first camp was just last night, with several more planned throughout the summer, so look for a link to that in the show notes. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Streets.mn podcast. This show is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Non-Derivative license, so feel free to republish the episode as long as you're not altering it and you are not profiting from it. The music in this episode is by Eric Brandt and the Urban Hillbilly Quartet. This episode was hosted, edited, and transcribed by me, Ian R. Buck. We're always looking to feature new voices on the Streets.mn podcast, so if you have ideas for future episodes, drop us a line at podcast@streets.mn. Until next time, take care.